Thank you very much. It's been great learning experience as well, listening to all of you. To me, I think it's important also to try to know what is happening. We can't solve a problem that we don't understand. So it is very critical that industry also seeks to understand issues that are unfolding in the communities and also among the artisanal miners, and also the different context in which mining is taking place. There are different jurisdictions, different laws. In some countries, artisanal mining is completely criminalized. In some countries, it is tolerated. So it is very critical that this engagement between industry and civil society is deepened so that there is continuous flow of information and awareness raising. This can help a great deal in formulating workable solutions that are also suited to different contexts. I completely agree on the need for a new vision for the industry. But it's not only about where the industry wants to go or the new things that needs to be done, but it's also about the things that the industry must negate and say no to this. So I think the industry is in need of champions who can come out and speak out. This is not only the responsibility of civil society, industry must also find its voice. Merely saying we do not source from conflict zones is not enough. I'll tell you that in Zimbabwe, the diamonds that are coming out of this country, I think less than 0.0000001% could be consumed in this country. More than 99.9% of the diamonds coming out of Zimbabwe, out of the mines in Zimbabwe, they are not cut and polished here. They are not manufactured in this country. They go out there. Therefore, it is very critical for industry to connect with people on the ground, know what is happening, and then that communication is very critical. But I can tell you that artisanal miners need your support. In our context, they are criminalized. They are not allowed to operate legally. But our industry has collapsed. People have no jobs. So majority of our population, especially the young people from even age 13 up to the 50s, their only source of livelihood they found is in artisanal mining, mainly because of the abundance of gold, diamond, chrome deposits in the country. So we need to capacitate them, like the sister who is spoken earlier on, that there is need to build their capacity so that their thinking is also transformed, that they can benefit sustainably from their industry. Because what I see is massive exploitation whereby politicians do not want to normalize artisanal mining because they want to exploit the artisanal miners by saying, you are a criminal, but if you sell to me, I'm not going to ensure that you are arrested. I'll protect you. Therefore, we need industry to come to their rescue, understand their problems, and if possible, engage even government authorities and say, how can you solve this problem we have this idea, we have this model, it has worked elsewhere. We think if you try it, it can save your economy and your people well. Thank you.
Just maybe building a little bit on what Farai was just saying about, economic despair driving increasingly people into ASM. It's not just obviously unique to Zimbabwe, it's all over the world. And I would add to that maybe an additional sobering thought is that we're seeing in parts of Africa, in particular, the ones that I'm familiar with, where, let's say climate fragility is making agriculture increasingly difficult for a lot of populations. And so we are seeing movements into gold mining, for instance, where agriculture is being less viable as a livelihood. But generally people survive on multiple sources of income, not just a single, mining or agriculture. It's many sectors, but we're seeing a move into ASM as, I guess, climate stressors and desertification are putting household under increasing stress. So that's a bit of a sobering thought, and why it's important to continue to consider ASM as a livelihood and to support that, and also to think about how it can become a driver of economic resilience, so people can diversify or be, more secure. And I would add to that an interesting statistic in our research in the Great Lakes region of Africa, and Uganda and Rwanda and DRC, where women consistently earn more in mine sites than outside of mine sites in those countries. And that's for 3 Ts, so the conflict minerals, including gold. But in Rwanda, whereas 30% of men make more money in mining, women make 223% more. In Uganda, where men make 64% in mining than in other sectors, women make 335% more. That's how much more lucrative it is for them. So to close that option for them is essentially really limiting choice, and essentially not only limiting choice, but obviously making some serious negative economic impacts on those people in those households. I wanted to talk about this issue of standards and the cost of standards and the cost of rolling out monitoring writ large, so supply chain due diligence. And I would point everybody to the OECD has issued a study in April about the cost and value of implementing due diligence, applicable including to the gold sector. I think there's some interesting research in there. It involves Just Gold as a case study, as well as fair trade and others. And it really is about, or what we've experienced in the last 10 years is unfortunately passing the cost of supply chain monitoring and due diligence onto communities upstream. And so the ones who can bear it the least are actually the ones that are who are shouldering the burden the most. And that makes it absolutely untenable. But what's interesting is kind of the emergence of thinking around new business models and recognizing that certain commodities like gold, the margins are actually very small to play with to make systems or responsible systems sustainable. So what kind of alternate business models can there be to make that commercially viable for everybody in the supply chain? So I think there's some innovative thinking happening there. And I already made reference to data, how data can be used as kind of thinking about as a commodity, and how it can be leveraged to think about bringing fresh business thinking to make sustainability commercially viable. And I think Martin raised the issue of scale, I think, with regards to, for example, systems like fair trade, really designed for some of the communities that have already maybe some more advantage. It's very difficult for the vast majority of artisanal miners to realize those standards. So how do we scale? I think, from our experience, it's very much about understanding the incentives that drive people not to work in legal supply chains, for instance. It's more cost effective to sell to the illicit market because you're circumventing all sorts of, legal fees and taxes. The person is there buying at the mine site. They're providing you with inventory financing. It's your known commercial networks that you've been working with for 20 years. So asking people to break away with that and work towards improvement with the potential that the market will eventually engage and potentially offer a new price doesn't work for the poor. I mean, they're working and living hand to mouth. they will take risks on a day-to-day basis to make sure their kids are fed and go to school, rather to work towards improvements that may only generate a reward 5 years from now. So we need to think about that perspective if we want to scale. What is the reality on the ground and what can actually drive change that speaks to people's needs? And I think that's absolutely eclipsed in the conversation.
Thank you. Look, I think that this effort to move the industry into a audited supply chain is a good movement. It'll let people make, in the words of Gaetano, honest claims. At the same time, I think we need to put together a team of people, the highest level of the industry, to think about the artisanal situation. We can't ignore them. We simply cannot ignore them. And we need to think about what RJC can do to create standards for it, even better standards, but workable standards. If we're going to move into this area of fair trade, which we should then differentiate that product with standards that say these are the fair trade standards established. It used to be called the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, now it's called another organization. But we should find the way to identify those goods so that they can be properly branded, packaged, identified, honestly communicated. And then those would be a leading edge of ethical products that high-end, I should say high-end consumers that are more sensitive about what they buy and where they spend their money would then be attracted to these products. So we need to run some really good products up there, that would then attract and give a halo effect maybe. But I don't want to talk, this is, I think we're supposed to be hearing from RJC now, so let me stop and then we'll come back and I'll bother you, Doug, maybe.
I've heard a lot, and I think some of the points I just wanted to kind of recapitulate. What I think is critical is, first of all, we need to be a united front, and we need to have closer collaboration and also more partnerships. And I agree with Farai, no one can do it alone. You need collaboration with governments, NGOs, people on the ground, if we want to show that societal impact collectively as an industry. So if we look at an industry together in comparison to other industries. Standard organizations like RJC play a critical role, because we've seen that since 2005 also, how we help companies understand, first of all, what responsibility and sustainability is, but also how you can create this culture of sustainability. And that takes time. And I agree, Doug, it takes a lot of time before, you really get it embedded throughout your supply chain, but every small step is important. And what we also see is that if we look at our 1,500 companies and 61% are small enterprises, is that companies are at different stages of maturity. And that's fine, because it's a process of continuous improvement and step by step. So that's one. So we need to continue to do capacity building, and we need to scale up efforts and get everyone aligned and to be inclusive. The second element is that standards need to be credible. So when standards are developed, and I'm really excited that everybody is such a big fan of these of standards like we have from other industries, because that's why it's important how a standard is developed. And I can only reflect to also, for example, ISEAL. That's the way that the RGZ standard is developed, because it's credible, and it's important when that information goes to the consumer that behind that are credible standards and data. And then the point on communication, I heard also that we can do a better role on communication. I also agree that there's a huge opportunity there to show the good we're doing and to look at impacts. And Joanne, as you said, have reliable data on the ground and frameworks. And finally, I know that some people are a fan of the SDGs, others are not. But I also believe that we have a huge opportunity as an industry to show really what we can do towards 2030. And those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as Gaetano says, really, it's about just doing good and being decent. And human rights is at the heart of doing that. So I think that's a critical responsibility. And for that, we take that very seriously also as RJC. And please, I invite you to look at all the material that's there to educate, to show what you can do. And it's really not that complicated. It's a matter of learning, and we're happy to support the whole industry on that journey. But I do believe that standards have a critical role. And finally, regulation is coming. So for those of you that, everything is what's happening at this moment at European level is coming to the US, and it's only going to accelerate. So we need to be ready and we need to be fit for purpose to be able to evolve within that challenging regulatory framework. And again, I think that's where standards play a critical role to help companies along in that journey. Thank you, Martin.